We began the session with a fight in the depths of the mine against a giant lake-dwelling octopus. Frank used his grappling hook to fish the creature, with Almera and Ivan behind him helping to beach it, while Vix tried to pepper it with arrows. Due to some unfortunate rolls, many of the arrows missed. Each round they continued to pull, bringing their enemy closer to them. They moved around the boulder as a way to entrap the octopus, but with a strong heave, they pulled it so close to them that they were in range of its attacks. Ivan barely scraped by, being slapped and suckered by them. But the team worked together to slice the arm of the octopus and free him. In the next round, a volley of attacks from the seven-armed creature battered both Vix and Almera, killing them. Frank and Ivan kept to the far side of the room and used their flasks of oil and light to burn the lake monster, shortly after killing it. They mourned the loss of their friends and relieved them of their items, while Frank cut up the octopus and remarked that it smelled like burnt calamari. Ivan searched the rest of the cave and noticed a small tunnel on the far side of the pool, as well as some coins floating in the water. Frank dived into the water and found a small hoard of treasure, as well as a magic item, a ring. Following this, they journeyed through the tunnel, which led to the ravine from earlier in the cave. The dungeon was swept clean of treasure, and the pair hauled the bodies of Almera and Vix out of the mine and buried them in a hillside grave along with Gumbo and Edwin. The pair returned to town and rested for the night. The next morning they met a shady figure wearing a bag over his head named Blank. This man claimed to be looking for Vix and had a bounty poster of the thief. After a brief conversation with the innkeep and then the party, he asked Frank if he would be able to cause a distraction. Frank used his new magic ring to create the illusion of the ceiling falling down. In the chaos, Blank then stole the innkeeper's lockbox and key. Frank and Blank fled the scene while Ivan sat with his drink, a bit bewildered. Soon after, Ivan left. After regrouping, they set out to go to Demdike's cottage. In the forest, they saw a pair of white dogs with red ears running, leaping, and then vanishing in the air before reappearing. They thought it was some kind of faulty illusion, maybe even caused by the witch. Demdike's cottage is a rustic woodland house with a lush garden of wild plants and herbs. Moss and vines creep up the walls. A small stained window is to the side of the front door. Blank stepped into the garden and trampled on some crops while trying to look through the window, but it was too murky to see. While speaking with the elder, Frank and Blank ruffled Demdike's feathers with their attitudes, but Ivan was able to, through polite manners, strike a deal with Demdike. They would help her with something in exchange for information on the scout. They were given a portion which they were to pour into the fields of the Haydock family, a family of farmers that Demdike has a poor relationship with. The Haydocks apparently fuel the village's bitterness towards her with rumours. While leaving the forest, Blank took a swig of the potion and learned that it would be used to turn the vegetables into monstrous plants, but if drank by a person, would transform them into a plant. The trio returned to Restone and decided to wait for night to arrive before pouring the potion. But outside the Devil's Delight, a group of angry villagers were waiting. They'd been barred for their earlier antics. They managed to convince the villagers and Tavern Keep that it was not them, but a third party whom they had chased after but were unable to catch. The party did, however, get the gold. The party trod on thin ice when trying to keep the gold that they had stolen, but in the end conceded and gave the gold back, and were allowed to access the tavern once again. During this exchange, Blank became angry at a villager named Greg, who pushed to blame the adventurers. The villagers then went off to search for the thief who had caused the illusions, and Blank was able to buddy up with Greg and lured him away into a field, alone. Blank then used his assassination techniques to kill Greg in cold blood for pushback that he gave at the tavern. But to make it look convincing, Blank also stabbed himself, his own blow being sharp enough to incapacitate him. Blank woke up some time later at the tavern. Villagers had found him in the field and brought him back. The party played it off as if this mystery thief had attacked Blank and killed Greg, but the attacker was unseen, and it was unknown where they had gone. The party decided to go to their rooms for the night. They used this excuse for Frank and Ivan to sneak out of the building, using a rope through the window. After the magic user and halfling had left, Blank went downstairs and inquired around about Greg's remains and learned that his body had been taken to the local church. He requested to visit it, and so he and a few villagers got a cart and travelled the roads in the dark to the church an hour away, where he paid his respects. But in reality, Blank was checking that the man was truly dead. While at the church, he also learned that as well as the grave robberies, the gravekeeper had also gone missing. Meanwhile, Frank and Ivan snuck into the Haydocks farm and spread the potion, but they weren't careful enough. Frank screamed and alerted a guard dog. The barking of the hound then caused Farmer Haydock to investigate. It devolved into a chase. They managed to clear the field and go through a stream, causing the dog to lose scent and escape their pursuers. And then they returned to the Devil's Delight to rest for the evening. So it was a very interesting session. A shame that 2 players actually died. Vix's player will be coming back with a new character next session, but they were taking a little longer to think things over and decide what they wanted to go and do. Yeah, I'm not exactly... I'm a little upset that they'd passed away, definitely, or were killed, I guess, killed in combat, though I sort of... because I didn't expect it, essentially. They had a strategy and they were using it, and for some reason they just thought that even if they got the octopus right next to them, it wouldn't cause any problems for them. And I telegraphed when they pulled it the second time and pulled it kind of into the middle of the room. I telegraphed that it had a reach to it and was slamming down, and that if it was pulled too close, it would be able to get them with its tentacle slaps. But they decided to pull on further, and I guess just didn't correctly measure the distance that they were moving around. It was a real shame for Ivan because he was very close to getting killed, but because of that he stayed away from the rest of the group. There is that thing that there isn't meant to be much balance to it, though the giant octopus I do think maybe was a little bit of overkill. I did reduce its hit points a little bit and things like that, because I didn't want them to, if they did just get straight in line, be one shot. However, they did get hit multiple times with attacks that, sadly enough, rolled enough damage to kill them. I wanted this to sort of be a thing to teach them, hey, you got to be smart about this. And they were smart at the start, but then after about 2 rounds, I guess they sort of forgot what they were maybe doing. They could have, in retrospect, pulled the octopus out a little bit and then ran around the boulder completely to then tie the rope together, which would mean that the octopus would be stuck out of the waters, would be beached, and if they wanted to, then they could have waited it out. The only thing would have been that the octopus would have tried maybe chewing through the rope and things like that. But even then, they could have spent their time, peppering it with arrows, I guess cheesing it. I know Almera's player as well, now Blank, told me after the session that, he was sort of happy that Almera died because he wasn't wanting to really play the Paladin anymore. And while he did, have some changes, he's happy that he's now playing the Assassin. And he says he's interested to play a more chaotic, more kind of evil-aligned character. Though I did sort of warn him to be careful with the line of treading on being a murder hobo, as he has literally just stolen and then killed someone. And the villagers, being suspicious of them is only the start of this. And, if they carry on to do things such as that, people will talk, word will get around, rumour can even spread to be bigger than what's happened. No matter how kind of skilled of an assassin he is, he's best working one-to-one, and if it comes to a mob of peasants, the party might not be able to survive. So yeah, a little worried about the serial killer kind of vibes from Blank, but maybe as sessions go on, character might change a bit more, and we get to see maybe a little bit more of a human side to them. I'm looking forward to Vix's character. Hopefully they're going to come back in the next session, or appear in the next session. I have a little bit of stuff to what they are, but I'm not going to say, just in case the players are listening. Frank, also, something I didn't mention in the video earlier on was that Frank did inquire about guns. Now, they're a new player, and they basically said that Frank had schematics for a gun, and it was just like a P9 or something like that. or some kind of magnum, and they just had a full schematic and wanted the blacksmith to make it. And I played it off at the time, I was saying, well, goblins use black powder, and that's sort of seen as like goblin work, and people don't quite trust it because of how volatile it is, and it's almost like a restricted substance, but it's, from what people have seen, they just end up getting blown up, or goblins themselves die when they try and use this black powder. The world itself, I didn't anticipate firearms to be a thing, because it's, I wanted a more early medieval than like a later sort of Renaissance type thing. If Frank's player is interested in firearms, then I'm gonna, speak to them and be like, hey, you can't just have a set of schematics that tells you what a gun is and you can just make a gun. However, if you want to have that as a goal, that you want to work down a route of firearms, that's definitely a possibility. What we can do is, you can spend downtime, put money into research, things like that. I did mention that the best place to go to learn about these things would either be to speak with some goblins, which could be very dangerous, and get your hands on black powder, or go to the city and maybe speak with someone there, maybe a scholar of some sort, a contact maybe that Ivan might have to, meet with, I guess, engineers. Which then could lead into a thing of, oh hey, we want black powder, time to go and try and steal it from some goblins, so then we can try and make these guns. But even then, it would just be like very simple flintlocks and stuff like that. I wouldn't want anything as modern as what the player was after. Ivan was the only one is now the only remaining person from the first set of adventurers, which is quite interesting, especially because it seems Ivan is a smarter character than the rest, but also the player is a bit more cautious, I think, when it comes to these things. And I guess for example, when Frank saw the dog, he just started screaming, even though they were on a stealth mission, and I think maybe Frank just doesn't take it as seriously. While, Ivan was like, okay, we got to keep quiet, we got to get out of here. Ivan is quite interested in learning some lore about the world and learning more about the magic, and sees Demdike as someone that might be able to do that. Also, Blank mentioned that he would be maybe interested in getting his hands on one of those potions from Demdike, especially if it can turn someone into a plant. Currently, they think, that they might just get turned into a plant, like a shrub. In reality, though, if they drink it, they will turn more into a plant creature, so like a living plant. But I think that could kind of be a funny sort of thing if a player drinks a potion and then suddenly their skin turns green and their hair falls out, and instead they sprout leaves. And I like playing with the sillier, well, not sillier, but, a wackier sort of thing. And especially because then, actions have consequences. And if they do want to turn back, maybe they'll have to look at finding some kind of purification potion, which could be a whole quest in itself. The players are definitely moving closer and closer towards the original quest line. Funny, because it's been, 3 sessions? So in their 4th session, I think they will start to get towards it. What I imagine is going to happen is session 4, they are going to go back to Demdike. They're going to speak with her. She's going to give them the clues to the map. They'll meet Vix's new character, and then probably head back into town and upwards, maybe restock on some stuff. While there, they'll find out about the troubles they've caused for the Haydocks, in which there is now a plant monster running around the fields and eating plants, and maybe has attacked some people or something like that. I was thinking that I've called them cannibal cabbages, so they're basically big plant monsters that eat vegetables, but they would be a dangerous thing. And I was thinking of maybe creating a few different types that have, different sort of things. So maybe there's like just little cabbages that run around and just bite you, and then like a pumpkin one that's a bit bigger, maybe is a bit beefier, and instead has some an entangle spell, and I was thinking spits pumpkin seeds. That's like the firing thing, and it only does maybe a D2, but it can fire some seeds at you, and so you just get peppered in the face with seeds, which I think could be quite a fun fight. Maybe that can get the party a little bit more in the good graces of the group. You never know. Of the villagers, sorry. But, yeah. They've definitely seen themselves to be chaotic and frank and blank. A bit disrespectful to some people. So, they're not in the good books there. I just wonder whether they will hopefully learn in time that if they carry on being that way, villagers will sort them out. They'll rough them up. Maybe even, you know, knock them down and send them to the city jail or something like that. Which in itself, you know, that just means further stories. That could be quite a fun thing. A prison break sort of thing. Okay. So other than that, I believe that's most of the stuff. I've got to prep a little more, get some things sorted out, maybe order some zines, depends on how I'm feeling in the bank. And soon enough, they might be going into their first big dungeon, which could be fun to do. Hopefully they don't die in that. So thank you very much for watching. If you won't mind subscribing, liking the video, or even sharing it, that can really help. And I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.